Hi, this is Privateer Station, bringing you day 416 of Russian invasion into Ukraine. As always, with Olexiy Arestovych, former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel, and Mark Feygin, Russian opposition politician and lawyer. Enjoy. Dear viewers, glad to see you all on Feygin Live. Today is Saturday, April 15th. Time is 10 p.m. in Kiev, same time in Moscow, and we're doing our regular stream, day 416 with Olexiy Arestovych. Good evening, Olexiy. Good evening, everybody. Well, we have to say that despite it being Saturday, we already have 35,000 starting with us. Big ask to those who just joined, please continue sharing links in your social media. Make sure we get more people able to join as we are live. Do not forget to click the like button. About 15,000 of you already did that, but please continue doing it. And of course, subscribe to Feygin Live if you have not done that yet. It is very important for us to have your subscriptions. If you continue watching that without it, please do not forget to click that button and ring that bell so you get notifications of our new releases. And of course to Olexiy Arestovych and to the Privateer Station if you are listening or watching that in English language. Alright, let's start with several main topics. I think they got developed over the last few days, and I think they deserve our discussion still. Alright, so let's start with that. Americans took that Jack Tesher, different pronunciations in different countries, how people say his name, but basically he's a 20-year-old pilot of National Guard who is the source of the leak that was discussed widely. It was a bit difficult to believe that it was a real story because he's, 21 years old. How could he even get access to these documents, to stuff about Ukraine, Serbia, China, Israel, and Russian intel? I don't quite understand how 21-year-old young gentleman can get access to all that data. He's already in custody and facing serious charges and probably a lengthy time in jail. Probably a lot of things will be censored out of the public view. And I don't know if they even will find if he was working for any other intel service. So in your opinion, how does that story look on that age? It is definitely still ongoing. Mark, first thing, he is not a pilot. He was just working on the airbase. He was, it's National Guard, it's not Air Force, and he was just working on the base. Oh, that's even more interesting. How did he get access to all that? Well, not exactly. One amazing mark, he was working in the communications. In communications, they have access to more things. And it often leads to the fact that secret information is being transferred and stored in different ways. Leonid Gedelman, a friend of mine for Israel, was telling a story that there was another young man in Israel who also got access to some of the classified stuff, and it was such a big amount that their intel was just shocked after he leaked it, and I think they're still taking care of the consequences. In every country, that's a definite possibility of a weakness for classified data. And that young man was somewhere in a chat, in a game chat or the group, game software discussion chat. I don't know if they were discussing who's cooler, who's got more data, so he published it once and then did it on the second time and captured more pictures and posted more there. So that's their American stuff. They'll find out who, why, and the details of it. The fact was that everybody who could and their brother used that leak. So our Moscow foes took that data and they photoshopped the heck out of it and tried to inject it back in the discussion. That's why the second set of numbers appeared there. crudely photoshopped, but I would not put that into super classified information, really. It's probably more like SBU, sensitive but unclassified data. So it does appear that this young man had done something that appears to be criminal, and he likely will suffer consequences for that. Will that, however, affect our Ukrainian situation here? I don't quite believe that. So, yes, Alexa, I think second portion of these documents is probably more sensitive. I'm not sure about that Ukraine is too sensitive, but the other part might be. Which part, Mark? Well, that they may have some sources in Russian intel community that are leaking data to the United States. Oh, Mark, who doesn't know that? Of course, in Russian intel community, there are people leaking stuff or cooperating with intel services. I would say, yeah, I just from my point of view and what I know, they do exist. They do exist in Kremlin. They do exist in the inner circle of Putin, even. So these sources are, yeah, they're everywhere. All right. So you think that, and it's the last time I asked this question, I think, because it was not the first one. So this will not affect time frame or directions of the main counteroffensive. No, it won't. It won't, Mark. All right. I think then this question is put to rest. You probably heard that Putin signed the law about the electronic conscription notifications and invitations to conscription points for re-verification. So there are some people in a Russian naive village who are discussing and thinking that Putin might not sign it and that he must postpone it. Mark, one of their official people did mention that this might start working only since for the next spring conscription, but yeah, they just deceived them again. I don't know if anybody was seriously thinking that this is a possibility, but that's what they were discussing in the Russian net. And at least you definitely heard that sigh of disappointment when he signed it. That, oh God, he did. So they were hoping for, yeah, for nothing really in this case, that no more hopes left. So addressing that part of Russian audience who was surprised, do you think that indeed that tool will be used to gather them to provide a second wave of mobilization at scale to plug in the front? Yes, Mark. I think it is a preparation to compensate for big losses on the front, big one-time losses. And in general, they're just restructuring the mobilization system in Russia for the future times because it was very imperfect. In difference from Ukraine, who were training and figuring things out for the last 8 years after they've taken Crimea and Donbass regions, they did not care. They had still the old system, which kind of somehow worked for them, and now they're facing a situation when they do need to get it better, so now they're evolving it. And yeah, there are probably two goals behind it. First of all, to evolve their conscription system in general, which needed that. And second, yes, to plug the holes in the front that they will have very soon. So, all right, let's take a look at the map also. And before you start commenting, I want to say we have about 150,000 watching us, and it's Saturday. So people do read and watch different materials, so do not forget to share links, click subscribe, and let other people get us in their YouTube feeds and other feeds wherever they're listening or watching us. That helps. Okay. Mark, how many likes do we have on the 12th minute? We have about 50,000 likes. Okay, you can move out of the frame, but please continue talking. Okay, Kherson, artillery duels, Zaporozhye, UAVs and artillery duels, Marinka, Avdiivka, and Bakhmut. Evil tongues on the Russian side, as if choreographing, are all screaming that Ukrainian military forces are going into some counteroffensive, and pushed back and took back several important positions, and even gathered several dozen of prisoners of war. Not us, Russian side. That's what they're saying. Understandably, these are tactical infights, but we understand that tactically this is important because both sides are looking for the best hill, best corner of the building, best angle to get certain advantage of their enemy and to make defense more stable or just fortify your positions. So that was a day of counteroffensive for us. We do not hear anything from our enemies who would be screaming about their success in capturing Bakhmut anymore. So in Slavyansk, there was a hit by missile, several dead civilians, including a 2-year-old child and additional 10 people. In Kremenная, they continue headbutting in the forest, in the green area, the general Kupinsk direction, without major changes, except for several successful counteroffensives by our forces. All right, so near Bakhmut, they are claiming that they have taken 3 more blocks of the city. It does seem that they are closer to the outskirts of it, because rail station in the center of town is being controlled by Russians. No, Mark. It is our people in the rail station. Nobody took it. No. They're lying. They're blatantly lying. There are no fights on the outskirts. The overall front line is understandable. We're taking the western part, northern and southern, and we're still holding center and even go into small counteroffensive maneuvers, operations there. As for the rail station, I'll ask people who are immediately there. Yesterday they've been in it. I don't know if they lost it, but I'll double check right now. I'll text them right away. All right, so is the pressure, can we say that the pressure continues? That people are saying that the road that goes through Khromova is also being shelled by Russians. You can see it on the northern part of that protrusion that goes from the 9 o'clock to about to Khromova, and then in the middle, and then towards Bakhmut. Of course, if they have advantage in heavy artillery, you can still continue pushing. And we know what's going to happen. If they continue advancing, and there'll be a real threat for us to be surrounded there, our president mentioned that we'll withdraw them. And military command thinks that it's still important to be there, so that's why. The road to Khromova, has been shelled under artillery fire for several days already. So from Bakhmut, and it's important for us, you still can get their military cargo there, right? It's in the red zone. Mark, of course, we would not be able to hold the defense without it, right? How do you hold defense without resupplies? So the group that is there, they probably consume several hundred tons of cargo per day, plus wounded need to be relieved, need to be taken out. There has to happen rotation activities. So yeah, we do have communication with that. And their attempt to do that pincer movement is basically an attempt to cut these communications and put that under their fire control. All right. So about a day before, there was a big article from Prigozhin, from the head of Wagner, private mercenary corps, and this article basically was saying that special military operation needs to be concluded, the goals have been achieved, and no, Mark, he didn't say that they're achieved, he says we need to declare that they were achieved. Right, that's exactly how he worded that, right. So that looks still strange and feels strange, especially from Prigozhin, but still, he allows himself to say that. The goals need to be announced as accomplished, but how do you announce that? Because everything that you talk about, everything that you look at the operation, that these goals are nowhere near to be completed. And that was demilitarization, making sure Ukraine never joins NATO, acknowledging the occupied territories to be Russian, Crimea, etc., etc., etc. So, what would you say about that? Why does Prigozhin need it now? Well, first, Prigozhin is trying to play the so-called truth card. He likes to stand out on the background of all lying and bullshit coming from Russian military. He's trying to somewhat be truthful. And there are very few voices like that in Russian media sphere right now. So he's playing that truth. And it's very advantageous position for somebody who's going to capture more attention or get more power. Another thing, it's important that he is wasting professional core of his Wagner in Bakhmut. You cannot buy them in the store. These are people who worked for years with him in Syria and other operations, so they know a lot. And one thing is when you waste your temps, like the inmates they conscribed and the others, but when you're wasting your core troops, that's a whole other song. So he's definitely not enjoying the situation. He sees how these numbers are dwindling. So it's better for him to announce that they're going into defense mode and let's insist on negotiations. Yeah, I think he needs his troops to not be sent into storming activities because the moment he runs out of them, who is he? Popular blogger without army? He could go to Africa. They have some troops there, right? Well, yeah, that's about it, really. So it's the logic of commander who sees that his personnel is evaporating and his numbers are really shrinking. So another thing, he understands that the whole offensive doesn't really have perspective. So that's what he is saying, that let's just hold what we have and see what happens. And many of them start that new song, even Khodakovsky, that other pro-Putin figure in the media, he was talking about the same. They're bringing bigger questions, kind of starting to think, are we living right? Are we doing the right thing? Perhaps we should go into deep defense. What if they break our defense lines? So what do you think it's connected to? Are you getting messages? Yeah, I am. Yeah, they are clarifying the data, so we'll know on Monday. They're fighting. Okay, so you think that is connected to expectations of situation taking a turn for the worse than if it was just defense and declaring that, okay, we're done, and not trying to achieving the borders of Donetsk region? Well, the thing is, he did write it specifically. We need to declare that the goals are achieved. So he understands they cannot be achieved as stated initially. So this is a big kick in direction of Russian leadership, basically saying, guys, you will never achieve those goals anyway, but let's declare that we did and reformulate what we intended and just keep what we're holding, because when we start losing it, that'll be a whole other sad story, and there is no way for us to continue advancing. All right? So you think there are no other reasons in his article behind it? No inner fighting with Minister of Defense and General Command? Well, no, he always cares that. He basically is saying that you're lying in your goals, they're useless and pointless, let's review them and set new ones. Of course it does carry that. It's a public political statement, strategic scale for Russia, and he is calling upon reviewing the goals of the whole special military operation, otherwise known as the war in Ukraine. So that's actually a pretty big statement. Do you think there'll be some consequences, Olexiy? Well, he is trying to live on the edge for the last several months. These things cannot continue going for too long in Russia. One day something will happen. He'll either join the elites, the leadership, or he'll be following Tatarsky, the guy who was recently assassinated in Kremlin, in St. Petersburg. So yeah, I think most likely it'll be a second route. Yep. So yeah, there's still going things there, right? So Patrushev is holding meetings without inviting Kadyrov, and everybody knows that Patrushev and Kadyrov have very, very bad relations because Kadyrov is a gangster in the eyes of Patrushev, and he still cannot get him. The whole story of Second Chechen War, I think, starting with the explosions of the buildings in Moscow, and many people did say that Kadyrov was poisoned, and I suspect FSB had relation to that, but there are no firm confirmations of that. Right, but nobody's dispelling that, and Kadyrov is not showing up on the meetings. That means that the inner elite conflict is indeed going, and in the framework of that conflict, Prigozhin is playing his own game, trying to get his own advantages, and we see that federal service is still working on the side of centralizing power and keeping their empire together. And regardless of how Prigozhin and others try to stand out, FSB still works for consolidating their imperial thing. So yeah, you can remember the murder of Nemtsov, for example, right? Whom did FSB capture? Oh, they captured one of the drivers on the Kadyrov official Kadyrov officers. They were lieutenants, and yeah. So that shows long-lasting so-called love between Kadyrov and FSB. They've been at arms against each other for a while. So I suspect Prigozhin's line will not be able to last for too long, unless he gets some lucky card and he remains in some sort of power. But that's only as long as the war goes. What's after? When the war is done with, what will happen with all of them? Well, depends how it ends, right, Mark? Right, Alexei? No. The FSB, regardless of the regime in Russia, will still have the same core to annihilate active militant and out-of-system elements. So that likely will be the same thing as they did with those leaders in Donbass takeover in 2014. And yeah, I agree with you, but they still need to finish this war in some capacity. That it would be better if, of course, they lose, and then they'll be facing all these decisions in a much more compressed time frame. All right, we'll see how it develops. Another piece of news about Lvova Belova, the second person charged with kidnapping from Ukraine into Russia. Putin's ombudsman for that. And she's posting that they're sending some Ukrainian kids from Crimea back into Ukraine. And that, do you think she's just shat her pants and playing it back a little? Because the news about her were that kids were returned to some Ukrainian relatives in Ukraine, those kids who were on the recovery and resort in Krasnodar region, and they returned those whom they could to Ukraine. So what do you think about that? I think they're de-escalating possible tension around that criminal warrant about arrest order for her and Putin. Well, it's impossible to paddle that back, right? Well, she needs to do something, right? She needs to play the situation back a little and make the right statements. So that's what she's doing. She's trying to de-escalate that, I think. But did you talk to Dmitry Lubinets? I think he was working with that question about the deported kids. Officially, we'll have over 15,000 kids deported to Russia. These are the ones that we know who names their exact locations. We suspect it's over 150,000 altogether. Do they all have live parents? Well, some of them do. Not all of them. Some of them died. Some of the parents were killed, but they still have relatives, right? They do. They do have relatives in Ukraine. So it is kidnapping. It's not even our formulation. It's International Criminal Court that considered it this so and even released the order. So yeah, Lvova Belova, I guess her neck is itching a little, and she's trying to do something, and she's being nervous. Okay, we'll see how that unfolds. I think it's today, the anniversary of sinking the cruiser Moscow. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday. So that year passed. On the first stage, we actually, the second part of the first stage, we saw some of the ships sinking. We do not see that anymore. What's happening at sea? Any perspectives there? Why am I asking this? Is that we don't know many things, and we get some interesting news injections from the Western press that there might even be a naval descent on one of the beaches, but Ukraine has not confirmed that. Yeah, it was the day before yesterday, the anniversary. Okay, thank you, Alexei. So we haven't touched upon the naval stuff for a while, and we didn't talk about the Moscow cruiser anniversary. So overall, we sank 18 vessels during the course of this war. After that, they relocated most of their ships to the eastern part of the sea, especially the ones carrying cruise missiles, like Caliber. And there is a bunch of ships around Sevastopol there that still defending harbors. And generally, they are trying to avoid the areas of reach where we can hit them with Neptune and Harpoon missiles. So if you draw a line, a vertical line along the Crimea Peninsula from north to south, they're trying not to go to the left of that. Sevastopol's problem is on the western shore of Crimea, so potentially we can reach that. And they have several vessels there defending that harbor and some personnel on duty, but for the most part, they moved all their equipment to the eastern segment of the sea. So Black Sea Fleet is basically paralyzed, and paralyzed by a country that doesn't really have naval military. So naval military forces of Ukraine, they're quite champions these days. Without even being able to go out at sea, they sank 18 vessels, including the flagship, which probably last time happened over 100 years ago for Russian Empire or Russia or Soviet Union altogether. So yeah, you can say that overall the Black Sea Fleet is rather paralyzed. Not fully. They still manage to go out on the eastern part, move out, shoot some missiles, and go back. But that's all they do. And yeah, these tasks are the actions of single ships. They're not fleet operations. They are not sophisticated enough to be even called fleet operations. It's, for example, as out of your detachment, only 2 companies would be working. So, do you think they can deploy a naval descent in Odessa? No. It's a joke. No, they can't. Well, some people are discussing. That's why I'm bringing. Yeah, there were some fairy tales about possible attempt. Yeah, there was one attempt, I think, early stage of war, the very beginning. They tried to deploy somebody near Odessa. They were trying to send some of the naval Marines on the shores of Odessa. They even managed to land in one place, but they all got killed by machine guns and local forces of resistance. And you can also remember the blow in Berdyansk when some of the military ships got really damaged. Yeah, and they wanted to. They initially had the ideation to do that. there are some generals, who want to try to do that. We have not done the naval descent for a while, so let's refresh our skill set. And they tried, and they lost, and they had to flee. And instead of enriching their experience, with successful operations, they enriched the basin of Black Sea with more opportunities for reefs and just pieces of their naval equipment and ships. All right, another one. Zelensky brings out a new list of sanctions. There are about 400, over 400 people in that list. There are some Russian soccer player, Averbuch, figure skater, Ksenia Shoigu, daughter of Minister of Defense. So we discussed recently that sanction rush was somewhat cooling down in the West. I don't mean Ukraine, of course. Well, Americans listened to us and they continue doing the same thing. They follow our guide, and they had two sets of very successful sanctions against Russian companies. It just stopped being a topic number one of discussion because big sanctions like limiting or putting limits to oil and gas, it's more difficult to invent something bigger than that. But yeah, personal sanctions, they do play. Yep, they continue. We implement, they implement. Usually our sanctions is the basis for our Western allies to implement their set of sanctions. So we're usually leading. So some people from that list will definitely be on the international list. Australia recently added more sanctions, Canada as well. So yeah, they continue. We cannot say that's concluded. So the office of the president, we can say that they are preparing the expansion of Western sanctions by example, right? So they're leading. Yeah, Mark, this is basically a two-step process. Sometimes West does their own sanctions, but for the most part, we make a first step. We give the idea and the list, and then they follow. Because that's a logical question to the West. Why are you implementing sanctions when Ukraine is not, right? So we have to lead. And Yermak Commission continues to work. They have a lot of targets, personal targets, company investments, strategic targets to sanction. So yeah, they continue that. All right, all clear. We have been live for about 32 minutes, a little over that. 224,000 are watching us live on Feygin Live, and 88,000 click the like button. I ask before Olexiy leaves, please click that like button to make sure we have at least 100. This is our border metrics, what we want to have as a result of a stream. He's not really leaving, he's joking, but please continue liking, continue sharing links in your social media. That always helps to attract more people while we're live and to get their attention later when we post that stream as a standalone video. All right, there is another interesting news that I think is worth discussing. Minister of Defense of China, Li Shanfu, will visit Russia upon the invitation of Sergei Shoigu. Even their last names pronunciation sounds somewhat similar, but it seems to be a continuation, or officially a continuation of Xi Jinping's visit on the 20th of March, and that is all happening on the background of intensifying the discussion around Taiwan and the pressure around it projected by continental China. So such a military exchange, basically. And we see that information does slip here and there, that some components, some elements of Chinese production are being found within Russian troops here and there. So do you think that has some long-term consequences? So the day before yesterday, they had sudden or unexpected, rather, military exercises of the Pacific Fleet, including some nuclear elements of that. And people were asking why. The why, one of the whys is that Japan woke up in a good sense, and they start thinking about their northern territories annexed by Soviet Union after the Second World War, about increasing military budget, and China, which normally is a contender or is a opponent to Japan in different military positions in the region. All of a sudden, China came out and said, "Yeah, we actually agree that those Kuril islands that were annexed by Soviet Union are in question." So one thing, if it was just Japan that wanted those two islands or whatever is there, and now China also says we're not against it. So Russia had to check their battle readiness there of whatever they have left, because this is a very heavy signal for them of that Chinese position. I think they're trying to address concerns of the Far East region. I think the Chinese minister is going to Russia to discuss the Far East, because Russia is not supporting Taiwan. Of course, most countries for today, they do support position of Beijing. Even the United States are thinking that it is a Chinese territory, just probably is not a matter to be resolved in this century, maybe sometime later. So that renaming, remember the maps we showed, Chinese maps with Chinese names for these cities in the far east of Russia. So I think they exchanged enough signals to get their military leadership to discuss questions. And of course, China is supplying Russia with food ratios for their troops, but this is not weapons. And I don't think there'll be a complimentary visit. I think it'll be more of a warning visit to Putin. We should read that in this angle. All right. I want to touch upon another topic. Putin yesterday on the operative meeting of the Security Council offered to discuss a question of information security. So our influence is being discussed in the Security Council, right? Yeah, information security. So they've lost it. They've lost this fight, and I think, that's a very strong effect that produced on them, and they continue screaming at us. Even their flagship of propaganda, Solovyov, continues to scream expletives in your direction, and recently called you and man with non-traditional sexual orientation, which I wonder if his son is telling him these things, who is a known persona somewhere in Britain. And if we look at Solovyov and his stream and his video, he did appeal to me in Ukrainian. Well, it's not really Ukrainian, but he tried, right? Yeah, look at that. I made the Russian flagship of propaganda to turn to me in Ukrainian. That's a funny one, but hey, it's an achievement. All right. I'll tell you that. I think in the future, we will make him do that in prison. Mark, no, we will have to address your methods as general prosecutor on a bigger stage much later. Yeah, I can be intense. I want to make a special statement here. A lot of people are writing, like, what if Arestovych becomes president of Russia? I do want to make a statement that I would keep Mark Feygin in control, so he will stay within legal zone in his methods for prisoners of this war and Putin's leadership. I will have to control his urges to make things rougher. All right, Olexiy. No, Mark, it has to be follow the letter of the law. There are a lot of wonderful places in Russia where just the fact of you being there might make you seriously think about what you've done wrong in your life. So you don't need to go into extremes with Solovyov and others. Well, I just want him to start thinking about that. I want his butt to clench a little. We can quote Saltykov-Shchedrin, a classic of Russian literature, not through wits, but through corporal punishment. And Hurtin Butt was the man getting wiser. So, yeah, tomorrow is Easter, right? So it's a special day. In the context of that, we've been live for about 40 minutes. Perhaps we can bring the question again, who is the true carrier of Orthodox Christian religion on that remnants of big Slavic world? It seems like Russia is losing that leadership. Mark, this is not even a question. So, Russian Church was created by Stalin. They're saying that he revived it, and they went to agree with him only because of the war and all. So, even if to forget about the moving metropolitan to Moscow by force and then holding him there. Even if you look earlier, let's look earlier into Peter's time, Peter the Great times. Russian Orthodox Church was under the synod, which is somewhat like an Anglican situation where the leader of the religion is the king, and every clergy member is basically getting his salary, his pay from the government. So Orthodox Christianity is very similar to that. And that was the period, the synodal period under Peter the Great. Then Patriarch appeared later in later centuries. So that story is a bit convoluted, and it calls upon different questions which people ask. So a lot of people are saying that the church always has to be with their people, even at the price of being together with the dictatorship. But one can still argue that argument because church has its own role to play, which doesn't ally with dictatorial regimes. And regardless of that, I want to congratulate everybody who is truly celebrating this holiday. Happy Easter to all people, and we'll deal with the church question much later. This is more organizational stuff. I join the statement, I join the sentiment, and congratulate all the Orthodox Christians with Easter. And last stream, we did talk about Dmitry. I think his last name is Bugrai. He's a very joyous person, despite of having over 70% of his body burned. We're showing his account in the Instagram. You can find it there, and he actually refused all the financial help. He says he already got it. He asked for some souvenirs from our Ukrainian shop, a t-shirt and a mug. So since he's so cool and a tough guy, I would ask our subscribers to come join his channel, to subscribe to his Instagram. It's BURGASS1. And despite of this heavy wound that he suffered during the war, he's still a happy guy. He's still enjoying his life. So BURGASS1. He lives in Dnipro, and he says he was helped a lot. So he refused help and said that he appreciates the attention. So if you guys can reach him directly and want to, indeed, somebody perhaps has bigger funds than we do or something, just wants to help, just reach out to him, support him emotionally, support his Instagram, and we definitely will send him some of the merch from our store. And if the man is so noble to refuse that help, then we'll use it to support kids, women, and other wounded. And then the third order will be men, gentlemen. Now that we have a new batch from Slavyansk after that new missile hit by Russian military. So if you know people who are relatives of people who were killed, wounded, anybody, any family that needs help that could definitely use some boost, please reach out to us. And guys, continue buying merchandise in our online store. That helps us to make these donations to the victims of this horrible war. Yeah, this store, just for our viewers, this store works autonomously. We have nothing else to do with them. We basically just post new designs, and these guys make this money, and we donate 100% of that to the victims. So that's it for today. We're meeting on Monday, the usual time. Please, again, do not forget to click that like button and share links. And we understand people are busy on the weekend, but still, please keep up the activity. Mark, it's Easter, right? It's Easter. Yeah, they're busy. I agree. I'm not competing with that holiday. But still, yeah, subscribe to our channels, and we'll see you on Monday. Happy Easter, everybody. Good luck.